This is 2016's Freshwater. Warning, spoilers ahead. We open up on a river as the birds chirp peacefully. Suddenly, the peace is disturbed by a jet ski ripping across the river. Matt and Jamie head to the dock where they hop off, and Matt shoots his shot with Jamie after she mentions that he can always make her laugh. She actually gives him a shot, and they agree to go to a party together later that night. After agreeing on a time, Jamie gives Matt a kiss on the forehead before she starts the jet ski up. After Matt leaves, Jamie notices some bubbles coming from the river, and she goes back down to the dock to investigate. When she gets closer to the water, she decides to reach into it to check, and she ends up getting pulled in. She deserved it. You don't just stick your hands in muck water that you can't see through when you see bubbles popping up like there's an underground geyser getting ready to blow. If you're gonna be that dumb, you deserve what's coming. Sure enough, there's a giant alligator that swims by after she gets eaten. I don't even know why they bothered to name her character. The river is peaceful again, and we see that there are quite a few alligators in the river that are hunting the other fish. We see Sam shaking hands with another official, and he walks back to Brenda by the truck. When they talk about one of the gators that they found in the bed of a truck, we find out that some locals have been poaching the gators, and Brenda isn't too happy about it. After talking about the poachers, Brenda tries to see how Sam feels about moving to the big city soon, and he tries to shoot his shot too. I don't think I've ever seen so many people shoot their shot in such a small time frame. I have to give credit to Matt earlier though. He actually managed to make it work somehow. The big CIA agent, Sam? Nah. Brenda turns him down, and she mentions that she doesn't think a regular alligator is responsible for the recent animal killings. After Sam hears about a possible monster gator, he tells her to call him if she finds anything, and Brenda takes off. In town, Deputy Clyde is getting served by Mary, and they're talking about how Clyde plans to show the new sheriff around town. They also notice that Travis and the other summer kids are back in town, and they just assume that it's that time of season. Suddenly, the sheriff calls Clyde, and he tells him to head to the bait shop. On his way out, Clyde bumps into Bob, and he warns him to watch out for the gators. Bob informs him that the gators aren't what needs to be feared, and he's more worried about the people than the gators. He's not wrong. I'd rather be stuck in a room with a gator than one random person. The gator's at least less drama. After Clyde leaves, Bob tells Mary about how the young kids have ended up ruining his fishing spot, but they mention that the kids are supposed to be staying at a big house on the river. Back on the river, Deborah heads out on her boat, and she watches for signs of her gator. When all she finds is a large piece of driftwood, she heads back to Mrs. Biggins to assure her that all she saw was the big piece of wood. But Mrs. Biggins tells her that she's sure she saw a 20-foot gator. Brenda gets her to sign the log, and she thanks her for her time. When Brenda gets back to the truck, she makes a call to check in about her work visit, and she mentions that she's going to go check out a big nest she saw elsewhere. If someone like Mrs. Biggins is calling every week, thinking that the same piece of driftwood is a gator, how about we don't throw that log back into the same river? Afterwards, we jump over to Bob trying to fish off of a dock, and I have to say that this gator is a little intimidating. It's freaking huge. The massive gator creeps up behind Bob, and it rushes over to devour him. Bob's hat floats downriver, and over at the main docks, the young guys get ready for their party. Matt is getting ready with Jason, and they're window shopping some eye candy that rides by on a boat. Jason tries to find out how far Matt has gone with Jamie, but Matt's lips are sealed. Just then, Claudia hops up behind Jason, and he introduces her to Matt. Claudia assures Jason that the two of them will have plenty of private time at Travis's house later that night, and the two of them make out in front of Matt. Understanding that this isn't his scene, Matt heads out. Back in town, Clyde is showing Sheriff Jones around town, and they wind up in Kim's shop. While Kim tries to smooth things over with Jones, Clyde can't seem to take a hint, and he keeps interrupting their semi-sultry conversation. Clyde is the biggest block I've ever seen. I'm a stickler for the rules, but he takes things to the next level. Jones tells Kim that he's looking for a stronger line because his line is broken twice while fishing in the same spot. Kim can't believe that a regular fish would be able to break his line like that, but he assures her that something started to take the line under his boat. Meanwhile, Clyde asks about Jamie since he's infatuated with her as well. But Kim points out that she never showed up for her shift that morning. After hearing that Jamie hasn't been answering her phone, Clyde and Jones make their way outside. Clyde mentions that he'd like to check in on Jamie, and Jones tells him that she's probably just fine. Just as Clyde goes to leave, Jones saves a kid from being hit by a truck. And now we finally get to meet Travis. Travis is a Class A prick, and I don't understand how he's able to get everyone to come out to his place. He heads inside to hit on Kim, and the second that she walks away, he starts to hit on Melody. Who does that? Somehow, Travis is able to smooth things over with Kim, and he still turns right back around and flirts with Melody. He invites Melody to the party at his big place later that evening, and he gives Kim a kiss goodbye. Back at Mrs. Biggins' house, she plays fetch with her dog while talking on the phone. But when the ball goes into the water, she tries to wade in the water to get the ball. Goodbye, Mrs. Biggins. Why are people so dumb about the water? Don't trust the water, people. Back in town, Clyde goes to Jamie's house to check on her, but when there's no answer, he heads around back to check inside. He's startled by Granny Castell, and she tells him that Jamie's probably still down by the lake. After that, Clyde decides to check by the water himself, and he ends up pulling her foot out of the water. Better yet, he ends up scaring himself so bad that he ends up falling in and finding even more body parts. That's a terrible way to find out your crush isn't into you. Speaking of crushes, Matt is holding up Jason and Claudia while he waits for Jamie, but they assure him that they'll just catch a ride with Travis later on. Eventually, Matt hops on board and they head for their destination. Back at Jamie's dock, the police have arrived to handle the crime scene, and Clyde finishes up puking behind a tree. After Sam investigates the body parts, he tells the police that this is a gator attack, but Clyde can't believe that the giant bite marks are actually from a gator. Across the water, Claudia hops off the boat with some supplies, but she comes to a dead halt when she notices a gator looking at her. Jason and Matt don't understand why she's so surprised by a lonesome gator, but she mentions that it looked like it wanted to eat her. No, Jason looked like he was ready to gobble her up. There's a difference. Plus, if they're looking for a predator, they don't have to look any further than Travis. Brenda's at the new pod, and she's recording a log where she mentions that this nest might belong to either a big family or one really big gator. Suddenly, Sam pops up and tells her that her big gator theory might be true after seeing what's left of Jamie. The two of them head off to meet with Jones, but while Brenda's on hold at the truck, Sam looks out over the water to see a glimpse of a huge gator. When Sam tries to tell Brenda that he thought he saw an albino gator, she brushes his claims off, and she makes her way to meet with Jones. After hearing about Brenda making her way out, Jones decides to look her up online. Who doesn't Google a new friend or partner? Google makes it easy for anyone to creep on anyone. Back at Travis's place, all of the guests get off the boat, and Matt's concerned that he doesn't see Jamie amongst them. Instead, Travis and Kim point out that they brought Melody for him to score with instead, but Matt still doesn't seem too excited. Once inside, everyone tries to get settled, but Matt can't cheer himself up. They all toast to the first day of summer, and after finding out that Melody has never been invited out there because she wore a back brace, they all decide to unpack their bags. Meanwhile, Cassie starts to get a little freaky with John, and they decide to jump in the water. When everyone comes out to check on John and Cassie, they get there just in time to see John get attacked and dragged underwater. Jason and Travis hop in a boat to save Cassie, but the engine won't start. Cassie swims to her little dinghy as quickly as she can, but she doesn't get out of the water in time. Everyone heads inside to call for help. Of course, the cell phones don't work on this little piece of land. Don't you love how the same communication devices that were made so you could contact people when you're in places without a phone end up not working while you're in the one place that you would need them? Fantastic! Back in town, Brenda arrives at the sheriff's office, and Jones points out her criminal record. Brenda assures him that she's only there to be the gator expert, but he doesn't want any trouble in his sleepy little town. After hearing that Brenda doesn't want to kill the gator, Jones heads out on a call about kids shooting their BB guns in the backyard. Once Clyde is alone with Brenda, he tries to explain that he doesn't think that this is an open and shut case, and they head to the morgue to examine the body. Sam rides along with them, and the ride is a rather tense and cramped one. Back at the house, everyone rushes inside to try and call for help, but the electricity cuts out. Man, is this gator the next best slasher? I know slasher movies that don't even think to do that. Back at the morgue, Brenda and Sam examine the body parts, and she's determined that this isn't just another alligator attack. Meanwhile, Travis jumps into the water to try and bring the boat back to the dock, and Jason ties a rope to him. As Jason tries to pull him back, the gator comes and takes a huge chunk of him. At the morgue, Brenda tries to keep pointing out that there's something more than just a gator involved with this attack, and she brings out pictures from a similar case in Atlanta. Finally, Sam decides to help her prove her point, and they discover new evidence in the leg. Brenda and Clyde leave to go back on the water, and Sam stays behind to get a report going. Back on the island, Matt tries to pull everyone together to come up with a plan, and they end up deciding to just stay put until morning light. Okay, yeah, why is everyone always in a hurry to get somewhere? It's a gator, it's not an alien or a serial killer. You could literally stay inside for the rest of your life so long as you've got enough food and water. Out on the water, Clyde and Brenda paddle back out to search for their culprit, and Brenda ends up finding something unnatural in the water. When she pulls it onto the boat, she finds that it's a snare for catching something. But when lightning strikes, they decide that it's time to get off the water. Back on the island, Claudia has to go to the bathroom, and Jason decides to escort her. While he waits, Jason thinks that he can see a figure standing outside, but they disappear when Claudia comes back out. Back in town, Brenda and Clyde examine the snare, and Sam records some findings for his autopsy. He believes that someone used something metal to mimic a gator attack, though. Just then, Clyde listens to a message on the answering machine, and he hears the message from the kids on the island. Clyde's smart. His first thought after deciding to go help them is to get a bigger boat. That's exactly what I would have done. Give me a river barge that covers the entire river. I don't want a drop of that water near me. When Brenda's alone, she goes through the sheriff's desk to look for tools, but she finds a knife that reminds her of a crime scene nearby. After piecing things together, she tries to call Clyde, but it goes to voicemail. Next, she calls for the state troopers, but they don't listen to her request for backup until she tells them that people are dying in town. Next, she grabs a map to find where the island is and she heads out. Meanwhile, Clyde arrives on the island and he ties up the boat to the dock. The sheriff pops up behind him and he tells him that he's just responding to a call from the kids. He takes him out back to show him something. Next thing we know, it's morning? I feel like something went down that needs to be explained. What happened to Clyde? Where's Brenda? It wouldn't take her that long to get to the island. There's some inconsistencies going on. Inside, Jason decides to check the breaker box, but back in town, Brenda and Sam call each other to say that they figured out that it's actually the sheriff that's responsible for all of this. When Jason goes to check the breaker box, someone pops up behind him, and the next thing anyone knows, the people inside hear Jason scream. Everyone except for Melody goes outside to investigate, and they find Jason's arm hanging onto the breaker box. Everyone runs back inside, and they find that Melody has disappeared now too. Kim starts to suspect Matt, and she punches him before running off outside. Matt closes himself and Claudia inside, and he tells her that they just need to wait together. Kim, on the other hand, runs into the sheriff in the woods, and she tries to explain things to him. The sheriff's ruthless. He even makes sure that she knows that Matt isn't the murderer before he stabs her. Just doesn't want him taking credit for his work, you know? Just then, Brenda gets to the island, and she finds Clyde caught in a trap on the ground. When she goes to help him, Clyde tries to tell her that Jones also has a huge pet white gator with him. Jones apparently found the gator when he was chasing a perp through the sewers in the city, and he decided to raise it. So Jones is trapping humans to feed his pet gator. After hearing this story, Brenda decides that she has to get Clyde out of there. But when she checks on him again, he's already gone. Suddenly, she comes face to face with the giant white alligator, and she beats it with a stick to keep it away from Clyde. Elsewhere in the woods, we see Jones has Kim tied to a tree, and she screams loud enough that Brenda can hear her. Next, Sam pops up on the island, but he doesn't last long. The gator literally tackles him with its mouth open. This gator is not messing around. Why did they even bring Sam out there? His death is pointless, really. Just then, Brenda tackles Jones, and she holds a knife to keep him back. She tells him that she has all the evidence she needs on his desk in town, but suddenly, Melody pops up and knocks her out. Melody kisses Jones and asks what he plans to do with Brenda next. Jones wastes no time at all in pulling his gun out and shooting her twice. When Melody asks if he's proud of her, he assures her that he couldn't have done this without her. But he doesn't like loose ends. He literally shoves her into the gator's mouth and goes about his business. Sheriff Jones is ruthless. I thought this was going to be a cheesy creature feature, but this turned out to be a pretty cool sociopath movie. Suddenly, the state police show up at the house to pick up Matt and Claudia, and Jones pops up to spin a story about how Brenda was the killer the whole time. With that, he takes Matt and Claudia onto his boat to take them back to the mainland, and the gator follows closely behind them. Then, the credits roll. This was definitely still a cheesy creature feature, but the added element of a killer being behind it was a nice little twist. Give it a shot. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.